Aux in, you're aux 4, mute, okay. If you have anything, it's probably low coming up from that podium mic because I didn't mute it yet. All right, he walked out. I think he'll be back in a moment.
Okay. So I wanted to run through the panels with you.
You have a program?
Sure, I can get you one. Or did they email you?
No, I like to have a copy. The email is on my device, and I need my device to put it on.
Perfect. The first one is we're probably going to take away the chair. I need to put the sign up. And then it'll just be 3 panelists. And then the second one will be 2. So, but we still need that 4th mic though for question and answer from the audience.
I was told 4 mics and 4 chairs.
Yeah, things have changed. I
Okay, so
understand.
you want a 4th mic? I need to put one in the chair for the audience for Q&A.
Yes, please.
Are you going to walk and hold it, or do you want it on a stick?
I want to stick.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. I'll get that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Phyllis Dickerson, the CEO of the African American Mayors Association. It is my pleasure to welcome you to AMA's Voting Rights Summit. Thank you for joining us today in person and on live stream for a panel discussion. Founded in 2014, AMA exists to empower African American mayors by expanding their executive capacity for the benefit of their cities. The role of AMA includes taking position on public policies that impact the vitality and sustainability of cities, providing mayors with leadership and management tools, and creating a forum for member mayors to share best practices and related municipal management. One of the pillars we focus on is civic engagement. And today's conversation is about voting rights, voter suppression, and how we fight back in a way for our member mayors and you, their constituents, to learn from each other. So we will start by ensuring everyone is registered to vote. This voter engagement moment is brought to you by one of our event partners, When We All Vote, whose mission is to change the culture around voting and to increase participation in each and every election by helping to close the race and age gap. Our partners were out this morning canvassing, getting students registered to vote. Please feel free to find one of the When We All Vote volunteers to get connected to the great work they are doing here on Howard University campus today. What a great way to start National Voter Education Week. We want to ensure voters have the opportunity to understand the issues on the ballot and make a plan to vote in person or remotely and inspire others to get involved. So today, our fireside chat is with none other than Mayor Jalen Smith, the youngest mayor in the U.S. and the mayor of Earl, Arkansas. And he's chatting today with Murphy Jones, Vice President of Howard University Student Government Association. So welcome, Mayor Jalen Smith and Murphy Jones.
Thank you so much, Ms. Phyllis, for everything you do and for inviting me here. It's a pleasure meeting you, Vice President. And so, just dive on into this amazing conversation about the importance of voting and what can we do to motivate other young people to vote. And honestly, it's simple. When it comes to voting, we have to understand what is the importance of voting, what are we voting for, why are we voting? Because it's very important. It's very important. When I was running for public office, I had all these young people tell me, why should I vote? It's just important because your vote is your voice. And it was very important that we get more young people out to the polls to vote and understand why what they're voting for. So what do you think as far as when it comes to voting, why is it important as why young people should vote, why should they go to the poll, why should they get involved?
Yeah, so I think that it's a kind of a multifaceted question. Here at Howard University, I study political science, and also I just want to give you the most warmest welcome on behalf of Howard University, on behalf of our newly elected president, President Benson, our vice president of student affairs, Cynthia Evers, but also on behalf of my president, Mia Naylor, and the entire 63rd Student Association. We just want to extend the warmest welcome to you as well as to the entire African Americans Mayors Association. And I think, right, whenever you are talking about specifically voting, and you're talking about how we get more young people engaged with it, I think the first kind of thing in which we kind of really need to, I guess, analyze, or this is something that we talk about a lot in our political science classes, is that what do we establish are we voting for? And I think that's kind of the first bridge or the first kind of gap in which we're kind of seeing, especially with young people, and as they're beginning to see these people in elected office. Because I think, right, the thing about our generation, and I think that we're kind of realizing this, is that I think we're tired of being the generation of broken promises. Right? We constantly are putting people in the office, or we're constantly electing people, and they say they're going to do this, and this, and then those things never get done. Right? Of course, being in government or understanding how government works, right, it's a lot more than just a magical wand that's going to make be able to get these things accomplished, right? But for average everyday citizens who may not understand, right, especially younger people who may not understand the average ins and outs of how politicking works, right? They don't get that the bureaucratic process is a lot longer and it takes a lot longer than sometimes for a president 4 years, and sometimes for our congressional lawmakers 2 years. And so I think, right, it's very much trying to break down, right, what we're trying to do and the things that we're trying to accomplish take longer than the time that we have, right? But I think the second thing that I guess kind of be able to establish more is, right, is that we talk a lot about the age gap. And I think it's very important to know, rest in peace to Dianne Feinstein, right? One of the oldest congressional lawmakers that we possibly had. But right, we're starting to see a group of lawmakers who are literally just getting older and not giving up any power, right? They're not even representing, so to say, right, I guess more so along the lines of the general body of the American public at this point, right? Because you're wanting to talk about, right, wanting to increase civic engagement, especially amongst young voters, right? But you have the voting, but you're continuously having people and like even campaign staffers and campaign operatives who are constantly trying to run this older crowd to increase younger civic engagement. And so I think, right, it has to once again go back to scouting out younger talent and being okay with a lot of these older congressional lawmakers having to now step aside because it's about to be time for an entire new generation of youngers who, in my opinion, I think are trying to be ready and get ready more to vote.
Awesome. That's an amazing response. So I'm just want to dive into first question. What are some ways to encourage young people to become more motivated to vote, and what should elected officials and their political organizations be doing to make the case for why they should be voting more clear? And so pretty much I'll kind of answer that first and do it from there. So I said encourage young people to lead the outreach programs, recruiting students with disabilities, open vote centers on college campuses, and host mock elections, create special activities for young people, and hashtag just do the work, honestly, because I think more people on college campuses would be more involved if we had on campus voting centers on college campuses.
Before I answer the question, I do want to ask you just a quick little follow-up, which is, I guess I want to ask you in your election, because, right, before I got to Howard, I was managing someone's city council person's race in Texas, and specifically it's a little town called Burleson, Texas. And so I do realize, I understand how hard it is, especially in local races, to be able to increase civic engagement and get the people out. And so I guess, like, how did you specifically increase, like, voter turnout, especially amongst young people in Arkansas?
So honestly, in my race, I really focus on the people I know I didn't have versus focusing on people I knew I had. Because focusing on the people that I know I have is wasting time versus focusing on the people that I know I didn't have. And so in the case, I knew that the young people was going to win the election for me, honestly. And so I went back and looked at the numbers from the class of 2018, 19, 2020, 2021, 2023, and 2022. And the ones that wasn't registered to vote, I got all of them registered within probably my entire year, because I announced my campaign when I was 17. I wasn't even 18 yet. So I started there, and I got everybody registered to vote, and I just had to call and make sure they come to vote, because people come up with any and all excuses they can come up with. And so, getting them out to vote, and then I also use the young people as another target for the older people, the older generation, I would say, not older people, but older generation that I couldn't get. I sent their grandparents to them, their grandchildren to their grandparents for me that I couldn't get to. And I promise you, I used them to my advantage, and I got them so much. And so they're pretty much what helped me as a mayor to win my campaign. I just had to think outside of the box, because a lot of older people wasn't ready for a young guy that they say didn't know anything to take office. And so I had to analyze it, use those young people, because the young people what matters. Because a lot of young people, like,
I don't want to vote because nothing will happen. Something will happen. You just got to give the right person the right opportunity and the right chance to make the difference. Because as I always say, I do less talking and more working. And so that's pretty much how I got the young people out.
Okay, I know that's right. Let's talk and more working. I think that, right, to kind of, I guess, like come back and answer your question on what does it look like, I guess, to engage more college campuses. We actually, as a university, just did, in a student association, we just did a kind of bigger voter event that we did where we brought Vote DC, we did bring out When We All Vote, and we actually had all of the NPHC organizations as well, all out on the yard. We had a DJ out there, we had food out there, and essentially one of the things that we were trying to do is that we were trying to just show people how to vote. So Vote DC had actually brought out these kind of like cool booth things, and essentially it showed people how they could vote, how they can submit their ballots, and what it looked like to kind of to go through that entire process. And so, right, one of the things that even we had to learn, both my president and myself, even here running at Howard University for Student Government Association, is that to increase civic engagement, there has to be two things. The first one is incentive. People have to realize what incentive do I get, and right now, I guess as we're kind of even moving into more of a material kind of world, there has to be, quote, in quote, some type of material incentive, right? And so that was why, especially for us, when we were doing this event, we wanted it to also be, right, we wanted there to be a DJ out there, we wanted there to be food out there, we wanted it to feel less so like you're learning how to vote, and more so, right, this is the positive, here are the benefits, here are some things that you get with you being able to vote. And I think, right, the second thing that is very important, especially when kind of talking to, I guess, like younger people that I've had to realize, is that we have to also meet them where they are. And I think that was a really big thing in which that we, as even like a Student Government Association, are really trying to make sure we do and try to articulate that even with administration as they're trying to figure out how they engage students more, right? And so the best example would be, that was one of the reasons why we did it out on the yard, right? Was because we knew the yard was a very high traffic area. We knew people would just naturally just want to come out there if they saw people there. And so I think moving forward and in the future, right, I think what universities very much could start doing is, right, even basic things such as, right, as HBCUs, even just like us upgrading or begin having conversations about, right, our mailing system, right? If you know that there's an election coming up, right, us beginning to have conversations, okay, we're going to have an influx of mail. How are we going to ensure people are going to be able to get their absentee ballots on time? Or how are we going to make sure that people are going to be able to send those back to wherever they need to be going, right? Because those are very just simple, easier things that can be resolved very quickly, because, right, that's just a conversation of what does it look like for us as we're going into a year in which elections are important. What does it look like for us to be able to do that on a university side? But I think the second thing is right, I know the university has really, or at least here at Howard, we've really been trying to be a lot more collaborative, especially with Stacey Abrams, and really much more trying to get her engaged with our student body. But I think going forward, right, I think we as student government associations as an entire whole need to recognize just as much the importance of voting as, so to say, any regular average day, any person who may not be outside of us, right? And what I mean by that is, I mean that also means not just engaging our student body, but also engaging our community that's around each one of us. And I know, like, for example, in some of the Southern HBCUs, I know that Grambling and kind of Texas Southern and kind of all the universities in that area, all their student government associations all kind of come together to host voting drives together. And I think that was very much a model that we could kind of learn from, is that we as universities trying to all kind of come together and host as many voter drives as humanly possible would probably be something that's beneficial as well.
Awesome, awesome. I like that. So I didn't get the chance to be a student government president on a college campus, but I was a student government president coming straight out of high school. And so are you guys working pretty much like as far as networking with different student government organizations to see how can you just share ideas? How can we implement this? How will this work? Can we do this idea to make sure that, because voting is very important. And also, are you all inviting the candidates that are running for public office to these campuses to see what are the plans are, why they want to run for office and different things? Because as politicians, we'll say one thing, but we'll do another. But not all of us will do that. And so, really, I think that's a driver where a lot of young people are not voting because we want to vote, but the thing is, are they coming to tell us? Are they coming to share the ideas? Are they coming to say, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do A, B, and C, but the thing is, when they get in the office, they do X, Y, and something else. And so I think that's a deterrence why a lot of people don't get in office. But my next question is, what do most campaigns get wrong about young black voters, and how do we help campaigns be better at talking to the issues that matter to young black voters?
I think the number one biggest, I guess, like myth about young black voters is that we don't care. And I think that is the biggest issue that we've seen, not just with even younger white candidates and kind of their campaign strategy that they try to use, especially when you start to get down into those last 4 or 5 months, like when we're talking about the get out the vote people and those get out the vote strategies, right? It's that there's this kind of, I guess, myth that young black people or young black people in these different kind of communities just don't have any genuine care about elections or about how anything works. And I don't think that it's not necessarily young black people don't care. I don't think that's necessarily not the problem. I think that it is that we all have came from places and we all have come from people, and we have had politicians told us that they don't care about us. And so as a natural kind of reenactment or a natural kind of response, right, we're trying to guard and shield ourselves more from politicians who have constantly said, maybe not through their words, but through their actions, we don't really care about your community. We don't really care about the things that you have going on, right? We don't really care maybe about, even, right, if we're gonna look at it more on, I guess, like even like a local kind of level. I know one of the issues, right, that we were having in Burleson, Texas is that it was kind of a different conversation around multifamily living. And the difference in that response and how that was kind of the differences in how people were kind of looking at basically all these apartments moving into where we were living in, and all these different people, they were saying, well, that's going to bring in an entirely new crowd, that's going to bring up crime. And I said, well, for all your dog whistle politics, right, that y'all are continuously trying to spur, I was always someone who was like a straight shot. I was like, just call it what it is, right? Mm-hmm. You were trying to say, right, that there's going to be an influx of a certain demographic of people, right, and that these quote unquote people are going to somehow, some way change the city so much that you and all of your local base are going to lose so much political power. And I think, right, that really is the kind of biggest myth that we're constantly seeing, is that, right, young black people don't care, and that's just simply not the case, and it's simply not true.
Okay, I like that answer. So I'm not disagreeing. I agree, and I disagree with that answer. Whoever responds, I would say number one, as far as listen, because as politicians, we forget to listen. Listening the piece, even though we may know the concern, the listening is very important. I would say meet the people where they are. I think you mentioned that earlier, and also this last piece is really, it just motivate me so much. Because older politicians think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it always have room for improvement. Mm-hmm. Because as words say, older people are for counseling and young people are for war. But if you don't give us the opportunity to get ready for war, how can we, thrive as individuals? Like when it's so crazy because it goes back to when I was having a city council meeting, and one of my older city councilmen, he's like, you need to go back where you come from and all these changes you're trying to make and all this. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I said, I agree, but I disagree. But I said, I agree, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it always have room for improvement. Because as a leader that I am, in order for us to become successful leaders, we have to take a risk somewhere and somehow. And also when it comes to voting. Somebody have to step up and say, I want to make a difference in my community, or I want to make a difference to run for public office. Because a lot of us in this generation, we get tired of the same people running for office that's not doing nothing. Prime example, Arkansas. Arkansas is a Republican state. All our people here in the federal government are all Republicans, even our governor. But the thing is, in order for Arkansas to make the difference, we have to step up to the plate and get out there and run for the office. We have to make the change. And a lot of young people, they're not familiar with our people that are currently in office, but if somebody young like me take a position or go higher, I think they'll get in the position to make the difference, because when we're looking at voting, we want to know why we're voting for him. Is he going to do what he say he going to do? And it's a lot of distrust in the voting arena. It's a lot, because every time, well, it's my first time voting, but when I voted for people to run for office, I didn't vote for them just because I liked them. I voted for them to see what work they want to do and what they were doing out that campaign, because when we look at voting, we're not voting based off people because we're their friends or we're their family. But the same people that we vote for, if they're their friends or family, won't do anything. And I think that's a barrier too, because when we look at this thing called voting, we're not voting it for people because we're their friend or their family. It's not about that. We have to leave that as business, because if you know your friend or family not going to do the work, why you vote for them? And but again, it just takes one person to step up and say, I want to run for office and I want to make a difference. That's it, I think. So I think this is a great conversation. When we talk about voting, pretty much in Arkansas, in Crittenden County, which is the county I stay in, Crittenden County is the lowest voter turnout in the state. But the thing is, from winning my election, I've got more young people that want to run for office, want to vote, because based off I won an election. Well, I didn't win. The people got out and they voted and they showed up. And it was really the young people. And we underestimate the young people, because it's not about how old you are or how young you are. You can make a difference at any age you want to. But we just have to, it's time. Honestly, I always say this. It's just time for new recruitment. It's time for something fresh and new. And a lot of older people get offended by that. It's not just that you're moving them out the way. It's that I want you to give me an opportunity just like the person gave you the same chance. And so, so let me move on to the next question.
I just wanted to ask a quick question then for you then, right? Because I know you brought up something really important, which is something, right, that political organizations, I don't necessarily think that they get it wrong. I think that it's just so difficult to do it, which is recruitment, right? And recruiting new people and recruiting new talent and what that looks like. And so I guess, right, for more organizations, especially like organizations that are dedicated to trying to elect and keep in places of power people who are typically Black and brown, right? What, I guess, like about their recruitment tactics should change, and I guess how should they do a better job at even, right, utilizing or leveraging HBCU campuses, right, as forms and fields of recruitment for talent? Okay.
So that's good. What are the needs for colleges, like as far as HBCUs, to get out there to let political leaders know what are the issues that the HBCUs are facing, and give them a solution of how can they fix it, because a lot of politicians make decisions based on what they think they know and not actually in the room having the conversation, with the college students, because I'm in college, but I'm not on a college campus. And so I pretty much don't too much know of what issue that they're facing, besides funding issues, more teachers, more professors in the classrooms, and different things like that. Because I go to a community college, Arkansas State University Community College over in West Memphis, Arkansas. And when I was going to college full time, I wanted to run for student government, but I didn't run for student government because of the administration. The administration there at that college is not right. I say not right, because when I was going in advocating full force and getting the job done, because I believe obstacles, challenges, and distractions that come before us, nothing but preparing us for something even greater. And I believe that so much, they really didn't want me in that position. They didn't even think I was going to win. They didn't think I was going to win my mayorship, and I was a college student at their campus, because I've always felt like whatever concern you may have, I may not have the answer, but I will find somebody that does have that answer to give you the appropriate assistance that you do need. And I just think, I mean, this is my first time on Howard campus, by the way. And I mean, what are some initiatives that student government is doing for this upcoming election? How can you all be more proactive in getting college students involved, registered, doing campaigns to get them ready to in this upcoming, matter of fact, presidential election? Because I believe it's going to be a Trump and Biden rematch. And so I believe it's going to be very critical because, I mean, Arkansas don't, we stand a chance, but we don't because, again, we're a Republican state. And so it's going to count on these HBCUs and these colleges that making, I mean, what do we want to do to get our colleagues prepared for this election? Really.
Okay. Wait, did you want me to answer that part about the?
Well, yeah, because I'm just eager to know. I don't know if you all probably have thought about this yet. Like, what are your plans and avenues of getting college students prepared for the 2024 election?
Yeah. So here in DC, at least I can talk a little bit about like what we as a student association are really trying to do to be able to prep for the election. So like I had talked about before, I know one of the problems that we kind of even had that we've been having, right? This is not even necessarily a problem as it relates to voting, but it's an issue that we have nonetheless is with our mailing system, right? Right, our mailing system sometimes gets a little bit overwhelmed, especially when it comes time to getting into that voter season. And so, right, we have been trying to have, I guess, more preemptive initial conversations about what is the strategy going to look like this year for students, and how are we going to ensure students are making sure that they're getting, right, their ballots on time. Because the issue necessarily sometimes isn't them sending it out. The issue is always them getting it, especially if they're using on-campus dorms or if they're using on-campus residents, right? Because the way that has to go through is that it has to go through our university central mailing system. And then once it's filtered through there, then after that, it then has to be cycled through and put into every single dorm that lives on this campus. And then upon that, right, once it gets to the dorm on the campus, then the RAs and the people who usually are sorting the mail then have to go through and actually then put in which resident that the mail is supposed to get through. And so, right, us trying to figure out just even more, maybe a possibly more efficient way for us to be able to do that. We've actually been having conversations with our Vice President of Student Affairs about, right, us possibly even getting things like another, we have one down the street. It's the Amazon locker, Amazon locker booth, but we're trying to actually just get one as it could relate just for ballots and things along those lines. And so that's been a preemptive conversation that we've been having with Student Affairs and an ongoing conversation. But I know that's some things that we do here at Howard University. I know that very much, and this has been something, so there's this thing called the President's Consortium, which my president, Nia Naylor, but all other HBCU Student Government Association presidents are all in. So they all have like one big group chat where they all have all these general conversations and they're all constantly talking about these things. And at the previous conference that we went to, it's called NASAP, but essentially it's where all HBCU student government leaders all convene one time out of the year to be able to discuss strategy and to be able to discuss what we're all going to be doing on our campuses. And that was actually one of the conversations that we all had, was, right, in a lot of these different places that could possibly be considered very much like swing states or very much, right, like there may be a nice degree of margin of error in there for President Biden, right, what are HBCU campuses going to do? I know that Kamala Harris just did her tour visiting some of those possible places, trying to incentivize people, I know at Hampton in Virginia, as well as North Carolina A&T in North Carolina. But I think, right, that as a university, right, I think that we're trying to do as best as we can with some of the resources that we do have to ensure that this year people are going to be able to at least be as civically engaged as humanly possible within the election.
I'm sure she'll be here. I'm sure she's coming back to Howard, right?
Oh, God, look, Vice President Harris, she does her trip back here. She was actually here when was that? She was here a couple of months ago. She was actually speaking on a panel. She comes here all the time. But I see the kind of strategic placement that they use for the HBCUs that she did visit, especially in some of even like going down into like the CAU and visiting like Clark and Morehouse and Spelman down there, and very much like being very strategic on her placement. And you know, Howard was a little mad, but I said, y'all, like, she's coming back. Don't worry, she's gonna make her visit. She's gonna make her visit down this way.
Awesome. Is it possible to have a on-campus voter site, or
What?
like an on-campus voting center?
Voting center. So we've had conversations about that here at Howard University. I think that it's more so along the lines of, right, I think it's having conversations about two different things. So I think it's really just about having conversations about just like, what does that look like for us as a university, and how do we strategically place it somewhere that we as a university can very much use that for benefit. So as like one of the things that we just did incur here at Howard University is we actually did just have a presidential shift in which President Frederick has left the university, and now we have been welcoming President Benson into the university. But one of the things that we also are now concluding is the Howard University Forward Strategic Plan, which was essentially our plan that we had for about 4 years, which essentially had different pieces of the university that we wanted to improve or benefit. And so, right, those different plans include things like us having looking at it from an academic standpoint, us looking at it from an infrastructure standpoint, us looking at it from a community service standpoint, and all these different places. But as the Forward Strategic Plan is beginning to end, we know we've been having conversations with the university about what does it look like, right, for a new plan. And so that's definitely something that we kind of want to be able to mention to our Senior Vice President of Strategy, right? What does it look like for us to possibly place more emphasis, or to be able to even place something within the strategic plan about voting? And what would that look like, especially for President Benson, and how that fits into his administration?
Awesome. So are the students here at Howard, are you having some difficulties with getting them out, like getting them to vote, or any issues with that?
So I think that's the other thing, is that we don't very much have, I guess, as much data as we would like about what that looks like for university students, and that kind of how often or how frequently they're voting. We do, so I'll use as an example here, because I think one of the things that we constantly get mentioned here at Howard University is that the student government elections and the student government races are like microisms of how the real world and how politics work outside of here. And I will use like our election as an example. Whenever me and myself were running for Student Government Association president and vice president, right, we had some of the highest voter turnout that we had in most previous years, right? Because for us, the entire university has to elect us, right? So you're looking at the undergraduate, you're looking at the graduates, you're looking at all of our professional schools. Our election entails everyone. But, right, while we may have had some of the highest turnout, right, it still was, I believe, it was only 31% of the entire university, right? So, like, we are looking at, right, as a microism of the real world, that ourselves, even though we had the highest turnout that we've had in recent years and things along those lines, it still is not as high or not as ideal as we would like it to be. And I think that, right, even that's a conversation that we've been having, right? Especially, how do we encourage people to vote in student government, right? Like, how do we tell people, look, like, these things matter, like, these things affect you, these things are important to you. And I think that that's kind of, I guess, like an issue even that we have to constantly face and we have to constantly endure going forward. And so I think that's something that I guess that's like the best data I can kind of provide for you, because we don't really have, I guess, specific kind of data on how well or how much our students are kind of being engaged civically.
Gotcha. Okay. That's understandable. I know I've been asking some questions. You have like any questions as far as like, pretty much I think, because again, I haven't been on really did it like on a college, like a student full life, because I'm just doing online at college. But pretty much when I left to go online, I gave them an idea about doing what's called a mock election for college students, and also getting college students registered. Because it only take like about 5 seconds or 2 minutes, just fill out a form and that's it, and take it. And so since I left that, they actually been doing that, and it's kind of been so amazing. So we just really honestly getting prepared for the 2024 elections and other upcoming elections that we have in 2024. But I know within the city of Earl election is going to turn out good, because we have some elections some things on the ballot that's going to kind of improve the city. But this is crazy. Now, people will come out and vote as far as like when you put, I'm going to say this, because we're putting this on our ballot, but we're putting a liquor store on the ballot for the people to vote. And I know that in the city of Earl, our voter turnout will be more higher because of that attractive thing, because everybody want to,
Everyone wants some liquor.
yeah, or that case. And so things like that to get things on the ballot that citizens want to see. Because a lot of citizens in my community say, I want to see a swimming pool, I want to see houses, I want to see more jobs. That can happen, but the thing of the matter is, when we're talking about raising taxes and different things like that, it won't be as funny because you have people that are paying property tax and different things like that. It's going to be kind of aggressive to not make it happen because of how they'll make their taxes go up. And so a lot of more young people are getting involved in different things like that. As far, number one, is we have candidates running for public office. Matter of fact, we have in my community, we have a young elected official. He's on my city council, and he's running for state representative at age 23. And so it'll bring more young people out to vote, because we have a state representative, which he's a Democrat, but he haven't really done the improvements as far as to improve rural community or underserved communities. So a lot of young people are about to go to the polls in 2024 in Earl, Arkansas, to vote for a state representative that's young and that's ready to go to work. And so I really just say the answer to the solution to that problem is, number one, is really just getting more young people to run for public office. Because a lot of young people back off based on what people think about them or the judgment. Because if you look at it, it's not about what people think, because people are going to talk about you if you're doing something good or bad. I love people when they talk about me. It just really motivates me to continue to do the work and to continue to push forward, because everybody's not supposed to like you. Because everybody like you, how can you grow as an individual? And so that's why I say I love when people talk negative or say negative things about me, because it just motivates me to continue to prove them wrong. And then they'll come up to you and say, well, I knew you was going to do it, and even though I knew you just weren't talking about me. But it's just killing people with kindness. Really, the main thing, we just have to get more young people in these positions, in these spaces, to get the job done. Because young people, if the older people can't do it, we got to use the young people to get the job done. Because young people will stay on their course, they'll fight until they can't fight no more, honestly.
Well, I do have one question that I just want to be able to ask you real quick, which is that, right, like, especially on a local level or on a city level, how do we better, I guess, because I know this is also a problem that we were having in Texas as well, in Burleson, but, right, how do you better encourage, and I'm from the South, love the South, but, right, like, even in North Carolina, like, I'll use, there's a small city called, well, it's not this one anymore, it's a small city called Reidsville, North Carolina, and the problem that they're actually having with their voter base is that their voter base is beginning to get older, but they're not influxing it enough with younger people, and that's also kind of hurting their infrastructure as well as kind of hurting their city very much, and so I guess, like, I want to be able to ask you, right, how do we better encourage, right, even young people to stay in the cities where they could really be able to run for local government, or B, encourage them to come back, especially, right, like, after college and after graduation and things along those lines, to go back and run for elected office?
That's actually a great question, because that was kind of my motivation to run for public office. Really what motivated me to run for public office is that I got tired of people within my community graduating to go be great in other bigger cities. And so the motivation comes in, to me, I can be great, I can be just as greater as my smaller community than I can in a bigger city. And so really, you just got to have the vision of wanting to make your community better. It's good to go off to college as well. I'm not saying it's not good, but it's good to go off to college. But I didn't want to go off to a 4-year college, and when I came back, my community is just a disaster. Because when I've taken this seat, a lot of more young people have came back to the community to teach, because I was like, we can't change our community unless people that left come back and pour and invest in it. I mean, we have people that have doctor, lawyer degrees. They need to come back and pour into the foundation that make them great. And that's a lot of times as young people, we forget, we forget where we come from. And I will never forget where I come from, because that community made it possible for me to be the youngest mayor in the country. I mean, they stepped up. And so I believe that I became elected. A lot of more young people are going back to their community to make a difference. You know, it's just, you just really gotta have that vision of wanting to go back and change your community, regardless of what people say. They just gotta move out the way. They either gonna get on board or they gonna fall off. But you have to continue to press forward through that. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about the older people. The older people crushed me. I mean, they gave me the most full potential crazy. They gave me pure D craziness for my entire year I was running for public office. Because I had them use all kind of words, targets. They went crazy. But the thing of the matter is, I'm not going to stop because you think I should stay in my place. I can't stay in my place. It's time for me to step up and make a difference. And, you know, and a lot of times us as young people, we think just because somebody's opinion, it makes us back off the chain. But we have to continue to go and press forward, because the trials and the tribulation that you're going through as far as when you're running for an election, it ain't gonna do nothing to make you greater and make you strong. For somebody that's gonna come to you and say something that works, but you already say, well, I've already been through this, so I'm just gonna laugh, I'm gonna continue to move. And so I think just staying here, going off to college and just going back and invest. You know, you don't have to stay there forever, you know, because I'm not gonna be there forever. But you can make a difference doing the most simplest thing in your community, as far as picking up paper, going to help senior citizens, or volunteering. It don't even take much to go back and pour into your community. Or when you ask people to come back, I don't want to come back, it ain't nothing going to grow there. How do you know if you haven't tried? I get that all the time, that it's impossible for a city of 1831 population to grow. I promise you, it will grow. You just have to have visionary leaders to see the vision and proceed forward. The people are not going to see it, but you see it as a leader that's trying to make a difference in your community. Because I believe in 4 years, Earl, Arkansas is going to be a model city to all rural small communities in the country that want to follow after. Because we're working to move our community. I mean, like me, I said this in the beginning, I do less talking and more working. Because I believe as a mayor, we have to work in every capacity. Every capacity. Sometimes you have to go out there and outwork your employees for them to do some work. You really do. But the main thing is the young people have to want it for themselves. The only thing we can do is encourage them to go back and pour into their foundation. Because if they do that, this world would be so much more greater. I mean, you have leaders moving to different places and running for office, but our community needs us more. We have people that's from these communities that can do that, but we need to go back to our foundation and make a difference there first. Then move up. And I think that's where the change will start first. Start small and work your way up.
No, I agree. I agree. No, so I think that was kind of, I guess, like a really good kind of synopsis, especially, and I guess it kind of leads me like into one of my last questions I do have for you real quick, which is regarding especially local politics and being paid. So I will use back in Texas as an example. I know that for one of the reasons why it was kind of harder, a little bit more difficult, even for younger people to want to even run or to even want to be engaged, is because local politics, especially, well, let me rephrase, politics in general, you being like, of course, like there's the part of public service in which everyone knows what they sign up for, right? But you don't make very much money, right? There's not very much that you get. And so I guess, right, like for that, what can be better done, right, as like young people, especially young people who may be returning back to their communities and things along those lines after going to college, and loans are expensive. I will say that myself firsthand.
Right.
How do we better, I guess, like improve or increase, I guess, a model in which they can be paid for the amount of work that they're doing, that would, once again, I love the word incentive, incentivize them more to really want to try and engage.
Okay, I'm gonna answer this. We gotta kind of wrap it up. I would say being a leader is really not all about money. I make $40,000 a year, and I sacrifice that $40,000 to put it in people first, and put it in my pocket, because I know I get my blessing later. And so, a lot of times, even though the income is high, money is good, but great things will happen to those who wait for it. And I think money, like I said, like as far as that money comes, it's plenty of money out there. And so, any given time, I always say this: if I have to sacrifice my little $40,000 to help invest into people, I will. And so it's really not about money. It's about who's doing the work to get it done, because your blessing will come. And I will say, wrapping up, this has been a great conversation. I know we're out of time, but it has been an amazing, great conversation to hear what you all are doing here at Howard. And I just say continue to do the work and continue to press forward. And I thank you for having this conversation.
Yes, absolutely, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jalen Smith, and thank you, Murphy, for the great conversation. We actually have a couple minutes to be able to take a couple of questions from the audience. There is a mic right there at the front. If you go to the front and have a question for either Murphy or Mayor Smith, feel free.
Hello, my name is Marlene. I'm a senior math education business administration minor from Edinburgh. And you mentioned how you went to young adults to gain their assistance so that way you get their vote. But my question is, how do we gauge students who are studying abroad to also register their vote so they're not directly here within our own community?
That's a great question. Honestly, I would target the people that's not registered to vote, and have those conversations about asking them why they're not registered. And they say, well, I'm just not registered because I didn't have time. If they say that you give them voter registration form, or you fill it out for them, or just have them fill it out and just put a couple of things. It only takes probably a minute or two to fill that form out, because the thing is, we have to understand that voter registration is our voice, and it's our power to go and vote for these political leaders. And honestly, people just gotta go get registered. That's the bottom line. We just gotta go get registered, and we just gotta vote. I mean, it's gonna take, I believe with winning my election, a lot more young people on campuses or within their community want to get registered, because their vote means something. And there's a lot of time, and it really goes to the distrust in our political arena. But we have to, as young people, we got to go back and vitalize that, of how, okay, we have people that's running for public office, just running for their own privilege, and they're not running for the people. And so we got to try to get those people out of the office and put people in office that really just want to do the work. And I think that better help just going to those people that that's not registered. Target them first and see what is their why.
Thank you. Hi, I have 3 questions. Am I allowed just to ask one? Okay.
Oh, you have 2 questions?
3.
3? She said you have 3 questions.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Yassine Ba. I am a freshman journalism major from Syracuse, Maryland, by way of Senegal. My first question is, how would you describe your experience as a mayor so far?
Okay, I answered. Hold on for your second question. So my experience as mayor has been phenomenal. I wouldn't take a single day back. It has been a great. I have been through trials, tribulations, obstacles, and challenges, but it have done nothing but made me a greater man today.
What would you advise someone who's thinking about becoming a mayor?
Go for it. Number 1, go for it. I promise you, it's gonna be great. You're gonna have people that's gonna talk about you, but again, life is not about having people to like you. Because if you have everybody in this room that like you, how can you grow as an individual? Honestly, for me as a mayor, people that talk negative and talk against me, that's my motivation to continue to press forward, honestly. I have people in my corner that their job is just talk negative all the time. I don't want you to agree with me all the time, because I want you to challenge me to my strongest point, that my weakness will remain any weakness. So I'll continue to just go forward, and hey, you can do it.
Last question, how can we encourage those who have bigger issues to care about to vote? Like for instance, food insecurity?
That's a great question too. Honestly, when we talk about food insecurity, it does require a vote. You have to get those leaders in the office that's really advocating for food insecurity or poverty or underserved communities. Because when we talk about those things, we have to vote the right leaders into the position. Because when we talk about candidates, it's okay to run for a Republican, independent, or a Democrat. But when you get into the office, it's not about that. It's about the political leader doing what's best in the interest of the community to make them reach their full potential. So we have to find leaders like that to get into those offices. But it starts with us as young leaders to find out and identify who can make that happen. Because we vote for them. But the thing of the matter is, when they get to Washington, D.C., a wise man always told me, leaders become relaxed when those around them allow them to. And we cannot allow them to continue to be relaxed. We have to hold them accountable.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, my name is Analia Smith. I am a junior political science major, sociology minor, sociology and secondary education double minor from West Memphis, Arkansas, originally residing in Earl, Arkansas.
Right. Yeah.
My question was, I know that sometimes the topics that people are voting on and what's up on the ballot, a lot of people are not informed of that before officials are elected, and then they get in office and stuff gets passed and there's a big outrage. But I do feel like a lot of people would have got out and voted and did something to stop like those stuff being passed if they would have known what was on the ballots before, people got elected. So what did you do like in Earl? Because I know like when I stayed in Earl, these elections and stuff, all I know is that people was voting for like Sherman Smith. And I didn't know what they was voting for. So what did you do to make sure that everybody knew exactly what you were running for, what was on, what you wanted to do for the city, make sure they were really informed on what exactly they would be voting on before they voted?
That's a great question. So what I did in Earl was, number one, I educated the people of my constituents of what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and improve our public safety, our economic development, infrastructure, and education, and support small businesses. Like I told my constituents, I wouldn't tell you something that I know I can't do because I'm not God. And I'm not the miracle worker. The only thing I can do is advocate and fight for you to get the things to better this community. And again, when I ran my campaign, I ran it down in the Pacifics. Pretty much, everybody told me what they wanted to see, but I really focused on what were the needs. The needs were, number one, public safety, economic development, housing, support education, and also support small businesses. And also, when I had those conversations, people asked me how I was going to get that done. Number one, having a conversation with the people and involving the people. Number three is involving our state legislators, our county officials, our state people, our federal people that's in Congress. Because we can't get that done without their support. And so it's crazy, when I came into office, those people were never involved in the city because the previous mayor didn't allow them to come be involved. And so with rebuilding those conversations, reestablishing those partnerships, hey, they're going to pour money into the city to help better this community. Because it all starts with conversation, but to get people behind you, include them. Inclusion is my number one thing when we talk about changing the community, because I can't do it, the city council can't do it. It takes us as one moving in unity to change our community.
I also had two very short follow-up questions. Murphy, me and Mayor Howard wanted to know, what was the facial expression that you gave when he said that there was going to be a Trump and Biden rematch? Because we seen it.
Yes, that was the question. And please speak honestly, because I think that is going to be the key between Biden keeping the House and him losing the House. If people under 60, really, not just under 40, but people under 60 don't have that confidence in him as a leader, age and all of those other things, it's not going to happen. So please be courageous to give us everything that was behind that look, because it was a look.
Absolutely. No. So one of the things in which I've really loved about Howard University is that two things is that the university itself prepares you not only just to learn the academics, especially in political science, not just to learn the academia of political science, but to be able to apply it to real world and to be able to garner and grasp your own philosophical and political thought for it. For me, right, I have tried to like really study political science, and I've really tried to study more so along the lines of the strategy behind winning and losing elections. I'm very mad at the DNC right now. I can't even lie. I'm very mad at the DNC. I think the DNC, and I'm going to try not to use any type of vulgar words. I think the DNC has done a terrible job this year, and not even just this year, but leading up to this year, at garnering and keeping talent. And I think that that's why we're here, where we are about to now have the oldest, just about the oldest. Is he already the oldest president? Yeah, we're about to have probably now the oldest president in the White House, in which, right, we're also, I think my other issue that I'm having with the DNC, and I think that this is the other problem, is that, right, the reason young people are kind of also not engaged is because, no tea, no shade, right, people are tired of the same old broken stereo rodeo of Biden versus Trump. I mean, you can only do this so many times. This is rematch for rematch. Like, we can't go through this for a third time again. And I think, right, so my problem and the reason why I made that facial expression is because I think the DNC has to move itself into a place where it is no longer allowing itself to tolerate these rematches. Right, we've seen this before. Whenever, right, we had it was Hillary Clinton and then it was Trump, right? Like now we're about to have Biden and Trump, and now we're about to have it again. It's just like, do you not have anything better to do? No shit on anyone, but like, do we not have anything better to be doing? Like, we, in the time and in the resources that we could have been investing into, right, getting that re-election, to getting those new things, right, we could have been investing that into new talent. Right, you could have been at this point investing these, and this is nothing on President Biden or nothing on the administration, right? But I think, right, you could have been investing a lot of those resources that that the DNC has been investing into his re-election campaign into finding someone else. Someone could have been founded by now. Not gonna lie. Like, there are a couple of people who's like, okay, these could have been actual plausible options, and which options that probably could have won. But because of the people who run the DNC and because of the strategists, right, because that's my biggest thing, the strategists really are the people who run the real show behind here. And because of, right, a lot of the campaign strategy and the strategy that they're taking, right, the strategy of campaign managers usually is that same strategy. If it's not broke, don't fix it. And that strategy really does harp a lot, especially on Biden, was this middle age to older age, certain population of white men. And then being able to turn that out and transfer that over to white women, specifically college-educated, suburban white women. And I think, right, Stacey Abrams provides this great voter module for everyone to be able to follow across the world. And instead of white campaign strategists actually taking the time to adopt and figure out how to make this strategy better and to make it work, they have instead tried to do the same thing in which that they're probably about to try and do again in this next election, which is count on and depend on white women and white men to try and deliver the vote, and then from there siphon off as many of these other groups in which that they can, because there is to some extent this voter loyalty that we have to the DNC. And I think, right, and this is what's about to happen, is that it's not going to have the same effect that it had the last time, right? It's not, and I think that's just the honest truth about it, right? We don't have, at this extent, right, like, there were so many different things pressing the country. There was police brutality. There was, at this time, we were coming off the back end of COVID. We were there was all of these pressing things that encouraged people. Those things aren't here anymore, right? The things that now we are seeing are pressing, but they're not pressing to the same extent, right? We're talking about things that take a lot more time to be able to kill, like inflation, right? Groceries going up, things being more expensive, and right, that hurts a subset of the population, not the entire part. And so I think, right, that it's important for us as not just people, but for us to be able to recognize that the DNC strategy that they're about to most likely take in this next election is not going to be as favorable as it wants it to be. That's what I said about that.
Wow. Let's give our panel a great round of applause. Thank you so much. Murphy, you did an amazing job and represent the great HU profoundly. And Mayor Smith, thank you for joining us. He flew in yesterday just to be here on time. And so our next panel, as we take a 5-minute recess, will be Mayor Patterson Howard, the mayor of Mount Vernon, New York, and the president of the African American Mayors Association, where we represent over 500 Black mayors across the U.S. And the great Don Calloway arrived, who is an MSNBC contributor, and he is the former state representative out of the state of Missouri. So take a 5-minute break, and we'll be right back for the last panel.
on voter rights with the African American Mayors Association and our partner When We All Vote. So for the second panel for today, we're having a conversation with Mayor Sean Patterson Howard, the mayor of the great city of Mount Vernon, New York, and she's also the president of the African American Mayors Association that represents 500 black mayors across the U.S. And Don Calloway, for those of you who don't know Don is an MSNBC contributor and a former state legislator in the state of Missouri. And just to let you guys know, it's a lot of crimson and cream up here today. All the Deltas in the house and all the Kappas on the yard at Howard University. We are glad to be here with the Divine Nine also. And so just to kind of start this conversation, we had a panel earlier with our young people and Mayor Jalen Smith and of course Murphy, who is the Vice President of SGA on the campus of Howard University. And one of the things that kept coming to my mind was this whole January 6th thing. And we didn't ask the young people what they were doing, what they were thinking on January 6th. So we'll ask this panel. So just to kind of start it off in a conversation, since you both have run for public office, one, what were you doing and what were you thinking that day? But then also, what in your election made you say, wow, like, I didn't really prepare for this?
So on January 6th, I was prepared with a popcorn and watching the tea mentality, because they had pretty much warned that there would be shenanigans. We just didn't know what the shenanigans would be. I would have never imagined that they would have stormed the Capitol. You just thought it was going to be a few more talking heads, some rallies, maybe some tiki torches, some marches, but never ever imagining a storming of the Capitol. And when it escalated to that point, it was beyond tea. It was beyond popcorn. It was beyond just kind of laughing and kikiing with your friends. It was a horrific feeling that sunk the bottom of my stomach. It was looking as if our country could be overthrown. And that is something, being a student of history, that I could have never ever imagined. And unfortunately, even just the thought of it today still lingers. And I still believe our country is precariously perched on that very, very thing. And this 2024 election is really going to be the tale of the tape. I know people are not necessarily motivated. We heard in the last forum, and I have a 31-year-old daughter who's about to turn 32, who works in government, college educated, and her opinion was very much like Murphy's. Mom, this cannot be a rematch. And she knows I'm a mayor. And one of the things we say is this is the most consequential election in the history of our time, and it is. But for many people, that's just not enough. And so we have to find a way to really drive the message home and get people motivated to vote. Because if we we don't need to worry about learning Spanish. We need to learn Chinese and Russian, because that's where our country's going.
Well done, Madam Mayor. Hey, Howard. Thank you all for having us. January 6th, I was sitting on my couch in Northeast DC, about 6 blocks from the Capitol, and watching, and I was astounded and horrified, but I shouldn't have been, because we have seen over the course of our history the extent to which people will go to make sure that non-white men are the only ones who do not have a full opportunity to participate in the fullness of our democracy. So we shouldn't have been entirely surprised. What we should do, and what we have to do at all times, is make sure that we see that January 6th, like all these other events, is not detached from recent history. 1983, who's from Philadelphia in here? We know what happened in 1983 in Philadelphia? Okay, go home and Google Mumia Abu Jamal. Sisters nodding. Organization called MOVE. When we see organized black protests, they are generally annihilated by the United States government and people who are enforced to keeping the peace, right? So in Philadelphia in 1983, they bombed an entire block of African American activists, not for being protesters, not for being violent, but for existing and saying that this is the 3 homes that we live in on this block. So organized black protest in that fashion has always been violently quelched in this country. So my primary thought in watching January 6th was that if these were black people, they would all be dead, right? And the white marble of the Capitol would still be stained red. So that's the first and foremost thought. And we have seen that in Ferguson. We have seen that in a number of protests, peaceful protests over the course of the years, in which black protest and black rising has been violently suppressed. But the bigger picture here is that these people were responding to an election in which the majority of white men did not dictate the winner. And so that we can see that and we can expect that into the future. Now, let's be clear about something. White men have not voted for the Democrats since when? You all have to know this. You all have to know this. When's the last time that the majority of the white men voted for Democrats? I heard her say it, but she doesn't count. I'm sorry, the mayor counts. She counts, she knows this. I need us to know this, right? I need y'all out here to know this. When's the last time that the majority of white men went with the winner of the presidential election? 1960, John F. Kennedy, right? What was the first time that was what? That was the first time that there was a televised debate, okay? And he looked so fundamentally different from Richard Nixon on the television screen that white folks, like others, were caught up. But since then, in 1960 was how many years ago? Who's a math major? 63 years ago now? Yeah? So in 3 generations, white men have not voted with the winner of the presidential election. What we have seen in a post-Trump era is that it is okay to not only say out loud that white men should dictate, but it's okay to violently protest out loud and kill people in service of the idea that white people should dictate the outcomes of our Americans' election. White men should dictate the outcomes of American elections. And the last thing is, we cannot look at January 6th in isolation from the idea that what happened the day before. What happened on January 5th? Who from Atlanta? What happened on January 5th? You from Atlanta? All right, what happened on January 5th? Runoff, that's right. Quavo, Offset, runoff, right? So what happened on January 5th was a Jewish man and a black man became the United States senators from where? Georgia, right? A stronghold of the Confederacy, a stronghold of the reddest areas of this country. That cannot be detached from what we saw in protest of a presidential election on January 6th. It cannot be detached from open violence. It cannot be detached from the idea of, oh gosh, they are coming and we have to take our country back, all right? So all of these things exist not in independent silos. And I done gone a little gray over the last 18 months, but I'd like to consider myself still a fairly young person. But we can't, as young people, become detached from the history of what's happening in this country because it's not new. And we are returning to a time in which violent and outspoken protest, led by and for white males. Black protest movements have never been fundamentally violent, right? Have never started with violence. We cannot detach what happened on January 6th from the notion that the history of this country is violent white men making sure that others do not have the right to participate. And typically what that looks like on an everyday basis is voter suppression, which we'll talk a little bit about more now. But January 6th was a horrific event, but it was not at all anomalous to the history and the culture of this country.
Wow, I'm still keeping hope alive. I know Governor Newsom just appointed LaFonza Butler, the first black female to take over Dianne Feinstein's seat, and so we're hopeful still. And so Mayor Patterson Howard, last term the Supreme Court sided with black voters in protecting democracy, forcing the state of Alabama to withdraw its lines to create a second majority black district in Alabama. We're expecting similar positive developments in Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, and possibly even South Carolina, all strengthening black voters' ability to shape the 2024 elections. How do we ensure that electoral strength translates into tangible policy victories for black communities like the ones that Alma mayors lead?
So, I was really, really excited to see that. I thought immediately of Mayor Reed and also, Randall Woodfin. We're hoping that it turns into policy, right? Definitely around everything around affirmative action, around supporting education, workforce development, supplier diversity, local elections. One of the things that we've seen is Republicans have always talked about how they hate big government. Well, they only hate big government when they're not in control of big government. And so they talked about the federal government shouldn't dictate states' rights, and states shouldn't dictate should not dictate local rights, but that's what we're seeing more and more. We're seeing a preemption of power, especially when you have red governors and blue cities. And so the governors are now trying to say that they should be able to control police departments, they should be able to control courts, school systems, and things of that nature, which is really, really in control, under the control and the responsibility of local mayors. And so definitely this should really help with the whole preemption movement that we're seeing. It should allow us to make rules around public safety in our own communities. It should allow our judiciaries to stand when we are electing them locally. The governor should not be able to take them over. But also everything from workforce development to education to housing. These are things that are very important, but also climate change, right? Before I became a mayor, I said, who cared about trees and air and water? We needed to worry about food and public safety and education and housing in our communities. But now as a mayor and understanding climate change and getting 6.5, 7 inches of rain that was unexpected on Friday in my community, and I spent the entire day running around soaked and helping people, black people for the most part, who owned beautiful homes, bail water out of their homes. And our homes are our biggest assets, and they're going to continuously be hit by by global warming and climate change. And we see a lot of these governors and Republicans don't believe in climate change, and we definitely have to speak to these issues. They're going to impact the very infrastructure, the economic viability, and even the safety of our communities. And so we're hoping that some of these are policy issues that can be addressed on a local level, especially gun control. Right, especially gun control, because gun control definitely needs to be more in the hands of local government, especially when you have a big city. But we need for our governors to also understand. I'm lucky, and I'm in the state of New York, and I have one of the most pro-gun control governors in the country. I believe it's California and New York that are really, really leading the way. But we're not going to be successful around gun control until Florida and Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, they change their gun laws. We will still have the iron pipeline impacting red blood from black bodies running down our streets if we do not do something around gun control in this country.
Perfect. So, Don, I keep telling people this next election is not going to be a fair fight. It's going to be like that Montgomery brawl. Everybody need to bring their lawn chair. So, what do you see as the most critical threats to the democracy, as important? What should the respective responsibilities at every level of government be? Black mayors, black county elected officials. I know you're friends with Chris Hollins, black state legislators, black policymakers. Even black policymakers in Washington and protecting the democracy for black voters?
Thank you. That's a great question. Well, first of all, I think that there is a voter suppression agenda, and we know what that looks like. But as much as we talk about voter suppression, we should be actively engaged in voter protection, okay? So what does a voter protection agenda look like? Any local mayor, any local elected official, Brother Mayor, should have a ballot box expansion agenda. Okay? What does it look like to make it easier for people to vote? And what does it look like? We talk about registrations and we talk about recruitment, more people coming out to vote. And you all did an excellent job on discussing that in the previous panel. But what do the levers of election procedure look like to make sure that more people have easier access to the ballot box? What does it look like to literally make it easier for people to vote? You want to go through some of it? Of course you do. All right, number one, and I'm no expert, but we've done a few things in some cities. First of all, we should be talking about changing the way we think about changing the way we think about talking about. No, let's just change the way we talk about elections, right? So we shouldn't be talking about election day anymore. We should be talking about an election week or even an election season, okay? Literally, from a policy perspective, we should be filing bills in our state legislature to expand the length of early voting to as long as will be possibly allowed under state budgetary requirements. So we have to pay people to work the polls. We have to pay places to keep polling places open, literally electricity and feeding folks and such like that. Well, there should be budgetary allocations in any city, like, I don't know, Earl, Arkansas, just randomly, right? Should have budget allocations towards what does it look like to maintain polling place access for a longer period of time. Now, red states will probably crush that, right? Because they do not want souls coming to the polls in a very literal sense. They don't want expanded access to ballot box opportunity. Well, you take that to court. Your job, mayor's jobs, local elected officials' jobs, is to file it and allow them to challenge us. Allow them to say, no, we want to suppress voting time to these 6 hours on any given Tuesday because that's the time in which white men were able to get off in 1850, right? So we want you to come on record and say that, right? So expanding ballot box hours, that is just fundamental one-on-one. Number two, mayors have something that's very, very important and very, very powerful called executive authority, right? Every mayor in this country has the ability to declare Election Day a holiday in their city. Right? And that gives Election Day off for city employees or the employees of agencies that contract with and serve with the city. If people have Election Day off, that does not control the private sector, which for the most part controls the employment and the commerce of any given city. However, the idea is that if a city holiday is a holiday, then the private entities and the academic entities and the nonprofit entities will follow suit and decide to give this community an off day for Election Day in order to participate. I understand that that's in conflict with what we talked about as speaking about an election season, but you got to do both at the same time, right? And some of them will stick. Third of all, when we talk about a ballot box protection agenda, what do we know about identification? And what type of identification is permitted to be able to vote in any given city? All right? Any given city, for the most part, it's a state ID. And we see voter ID bills passed every year. That's because, as Kevin Gates say, they don't get tied, right? So why should we? Why should we not be putting out the same proposals via executive order or via legislative action or however we have to do it year after year? So agenda item number 3 is voter ID expansion, right? Or even non-ID. If you live in Earl, Arkansas, you can't come up with an ID that says I'm Don Calloway because everybody knows who you are, right? Everybody in this community knows who you are, and we should have notaries and affidavits in place that you have to sign under pains and penalties of perjury that you are who you say you are, or else we're not going to, and you will be prosecuted if you're voting fraudulently, right? So ID lax is necessary on the local level. And the last thing I would say on the local level is citywide ballot boxing, right? So if I want to vote in Mount Vernon, I shouldn't have to show up to my church, my particular polling place where I have all day. Why? Because black people have challenged communities, most of which are black and brown in this country, have hourly wage jobs, which we have to travel to. We might have to take 1 bus, 2 bus, get a ride, so on and so forth. And my polling place might be right here, but my workspace is over here, and I got to work all day and get back to the polling place, let alone pick up some kids, let alone check on my grandmama and them. So let's make sure that in any given city or in any given county, I can vote at any eligible polling place, and we'll sort out the details later. Because people ain't going from place to place and voting 2 or 3 times. That's just not the history of black electoral participation, right? So that's just 4 I've given off the top of my head, but there are multiple levers we can pull to expand ballot box access and make it easier for people to vote, because we can assure you that the other side is actively and intentionally making it harder for people to vote.
Perfect, perfect. So, Mayor Patterson Howard, I did not have the luxury of going to a HBCU like even Don. So Mayor Patterson Howard is a HU grad, of course, and Don, undergrad, is from Alabama A&M, and his law degree is from Boston University. So he had the privilege of going to HBCU and a PWI. So I wanted to ask you, because I always wanted to ask people this, since I went to 2 PWIs, unfortunately. Did your HBCU experience prepare you to run for local office?
It absolutely did. I am a graduate of the Howard University School of Social Work, class of 1990. And I was here when we overthrew student government. I was here when we had the protest and we got rid of President Cheeks, who actually came into office in the protests when the Black Panthers were on campus, and they overthrew that president, but he lost his way. And so I went to school with Kasim Reed, I went to school with Ras Baraka, and it was the Black Nia Force, and so many things that were happening on campus. But it was our professors, it was the lunch ladies, really. It was the security guards on campus. There was a spirit of protest and a voice on Howard University's campus. Yes, our dorms were a little janky, right? And they're getting better now. But I felt like going to Howard University was like pledging. And my teachers always told us, no one in life is going to give you tea for your fever, baby, so get over it and be prepared now. Just because you're at a Black university and we're Black professors does not mean we're going to make your way easy. And so they taught us, I think, at a very early and impressionable age that you were going to have to fight for what was yours, that no one, Black or white, owed you anything, nor were they going to give it to you. And so I've taken that type of attitude and spirit with me all throughout my life. And even upon election, you asked what was the one thing that I found shocking. My family has been in Mount Vernon since 1862. We were one of the first or second, we don't argue about it anymore, Black families in the community. And my grandfather was the first person ever of color to work in our city hall. He cleaned the basement, the sub-basement, and he shoveled coal. So it wasn't about his education. And it wasn't about me running on popularity because I was never interested in politics. But what was shocking to me at almost 50 years old is the amount of work that people would put in to hold on to power and to disenfranchise you and to tear you down and to push you away from running for office. And these were people who I'd known all my life, people who knew my family 3 and 4 generations, but who were not really ready for change. I think the one thing that people say they want the most is change, and the thing that people fear the most is change. And so I was definitely in the center of that. And while Jalen ran when he was 18 and people thought he was too young, I had people telling me that I was too young. It wasn't my turn. And so, that begged the question, but I understood that, and that's one of the reasons that I didn't work for government and I kind of tried to stay away from politics, because I saw how much people did not want young people's voices and young professionals' voices. And so that was the big shock for me, is how much people would really, really come together to tell you you're important and insignificant at the same time, to tell you that your voice mattered, but to stay in your place. And I think that is how Howard really, really prepared me, because it helped me to understand that I could either play a harp or I could blow a trumpet, and there were times to do both. And when I ran for office, it was time to blow a trumpet, and sometimes in the boardroom I have to play the harp, but I write like a trumpet. And you have to get people to understand and hear. And so I think my HBCU experience definitely taught me that. And what I said, I had an opportunity at CPC last week to speak to 100 young women from 29 HBCUs who were in a leadership program. And I told them, let's move away from Black Girl Magic, because we're not girls, nor are we magic. We work hard, we're exhausted, we're tired. What we are is Black woman excellence. And no one's giving anything. We are pushing, and we are striving, and we are working, and we are pressing. And so let's move away from magic. Magic means trickery, right? Magic means that you did something without a lot of whole work. No, what we do is work. And Howard really, really instilled that in me.
Don.
So what is it to run for office? To run for office is to say my agenda, my team, my supporters can do this better than the existing structure that's in place. That's an organized form of protest. There's no institution, there's no universe in which Black protest has not been violently suppressed outside of the context of the historically Black college and university. Right? We'll repeat this. There's no universe in which Black protest has not been violently suppressed outside of the context of organized HBCU protests. Okay? So, for me, a Black college was important, and I started at the University of Missouri, so I did a year there, and so I kind of had both experiences. But For me, the Black College is an opportunity, whether or not you are into organized protest and whether or not that develops into official democratic protests and run for office, it is the opportunity at which you have a chance to grow and become fully actualized outside of the context of an unsafe white-controlled world, right? So you have the opportunity to learn and grow and become and think. And decades and decades of actual neuroscience tells us that the human brain is not fully developed until 25 years old. So imagine the opportunity to learn and think and grow and socialize and make mistakes outside of the white penal structure, right? Which we know will suppress violently at most times organized black protests, no matter how peaceful it is. So for me, the HBCU experience and being a part of student government and being a part of this general campus leadership was an important opportunity to begin to develop ideas and thoughts and actual tactics that go towards running for office and galvanizing people and gathering agendas and teaching people to think alongside you. All of that was developed on a black college campus, whether or not you go into the world to run for office. But HBCUs are an extraordinarily important incubating place to begin to be able to put together the skills that can eventually help guide a larger social agenda, which we hope that our leaders would use responsibly towards pushing our people. That's why I'm excited for LaFonza Butler out of Jackson State. Obviously, because I think that her legislative agenda will be aligned with the Democratic Party, of which I'm a member, but more importantly because I understand that her shared experiences coming from Magnolia, Mississippi, being an openly gay black woman with a black wife and an African named daughter, being in the labor movement out of California, being the chair of the Children's Defense Fund, chaired here based here in Washington, D.C. Her shared experiences will hopefully, and we expect, they will be reflected in policy. All that comes from Jackson State and Magnolia, Mississippi, and Howard, and Alabama A&M. And those are the places that you have an opportunity to develop these critical thinking skills. And not that you couldn't develop at University of Arkansas in North Arkansas, or at Boston University, but it's more dangerous there. And we have to have the opportunities to thrive outside of the specter of danger.
And if I could just, so when we overthrew campus here back in the 80s, we literally ran into the administration building and locked ourselves in. We had to exist in there for several days. Other students on campus rallied together, brought food, brought water. The Congressional Black Caucus showed up. Coretta Scott King showed up. Jesse Jackson showed up. Because at that time, the mayor, I believe it was Sharon Pratt Kelly, she called and told them to gas us with tear gas and to smoke us out of the building. But we had black leaders from all over the country excited for probably the first time in 20 years since the 60s. This was the largest organized student protest that they saw in the country. And they came to our aid, and even Bill Cosby was on campus that day. He was supposed to give the convocation speech at Crampton Auditorium, and then they brought him over to Blackburn. But we had black leaders show up and say, we will bail them out, you are not going to expel these students from school, and you are not going to gas bomb black students at the Mecca of black education in the capital of the United States. And I know for a fact that if we were not on a black college campus, it would have went a very different way. We didn't know which way it would go when we were angry, snatched the flag off the flagpole and ran with it burning into the A building, how it was all going to turn out, but we knew we had to do something because instead of putting Earl Graves, who was the head of Black Enterprise, on our board, they were putting Lee Atwater on our board, who was the protege of Strom Thurmond, who was one of the racist electeds from the South in the history of this country. And that was in exchange for our president of the university to become an educational ambassador after he retired. And we were not going to sell out the Mecca for him to get an educational ambassadorship.
Wow, wow. So we're going to do a couple more questions before we open it up for the audience. So, Mayor, As important as issues like ballot access and administration of elections is, the integrity of elections, particularly in the era of election deniers. We all saw January 6th, but January 6th could very well be repeated if President Trump is the nominee and loses in 2024. How should we all be preparing ourselves for the very likely scenario of the result of 2024 election being denied if President Biden is reelected?
Well, you said it earlier, that it would be bloody on Capitol Hill. It would have been, right? But I don't think that it will end up like that again. And it is, I don't know how to prepare myself for that. I mean, I honestly don't. I really wish I knew how to prepare myself for election deniers again. I don't have an answer to that. I don't want to move to Canada. I don't want to become an expat. You know, I mean, really, like, how do you really wrap your head around what this country could become and what our country could go through? We will never be able to catch up in the arms race as people of color, and that's not what I would want us to do. We don't want civil war in our country. So I don't really have a great answer for that, Phyllis. That is outside of prayer and keeping my passport good and saving some money. I really am not sure what to say. It is a very, very scary thought, and it's one that we cannot allow to come to pass. So I'm going to pass that to you.
Well, one way is a couple of things. First of all, when you look at domestic catastrophe in this country, it's never too far detached from civil rights. Every governor has access to their state's National Guard. The mayor of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. does not have a governor. We do not have votes in Congress like we should. We don't have 2 senators. We don't have a voting member of the House. If we had a proper governing structure like every other state, many of whom we are more populous than and we contribute more to the federal economy and taxes than, then we would have had a governor who would have had the ability to deploy a National Guard to stop some of what happened, perhaps not all of what happened, but some of what happened. So it's never too far detached from the civil rights issue of Washington, D.C. not properly being the 51st state with proper representation and protections that are afforded to every other United States citizen. Second of all, we're talking about the immediate context of any given day between to make sure that the transition of power happens properly. The current president will be in charge of the United States military. The previous president made sure that the United States military was not properly engaged at the time of armed conflict in an insurrectionist state at the Capitol. So we saw the Confederate battle flag flown inside the rotunda for the first time since 1856. That is an intentional act of insurrection supported by the previous president who controlled the military and chose not to deploy them to protect real people in real time. So in the immediate sense, one way to protect us is just Joe will do differently than what your boy did on the same circumstances. And I think that if we're talking about the day, right, a violent insurrection, we can never detach that from the fact that that's his doing, right? That's his doing by omission, by not engaging with armed military when he could and frankly should have.
And it was very interesting to hear some of the Army generals speak the other day about not pledging their loyalty to an insurrectionist or someone who would want to be in power. So it is very interesting to see how that would play out. And we hope people would stand for what the leader of the country says at that time, because I have no doubt that our military is also full of insurrectionists.
Well, if you think about University of Alabama, 1963 or 64, President Kennedy directing the Attorney General, who happened to be his brother, Robert Kennedy, to have armed National Guard escort the young man and the young woman. They got the young woman from Alabama A&M. She was not a freshman, but the young brother who accompanied her, they were forced into being admitted at the University of Alabama on the orders of the president as executed by the military. This is 1963, University of Alabama integrates. Attorney General Eric Holder is married to her sister, Vivian Malone. Vivian Malone was the first black student at the University of Alabama, and she was given admittance on the orders of the president, who had the military escort her into the front door over Governor George Wallace's objections, right? Who stood at the front door and said, you know, we will never have Negroes at the university. Y'all got to know this stuff. We shouldn't be the only people in the room who know this stuff. And I'm not giving a lecture. I'm saying if you know this stuff, then you know what we have the authority to do if you have the heart in place, right? So the president has the authority to deploy the military to protect against insurrection, right? To force you to do the shit you need to do. Y'all had Orville Faubus down in Arkansas, right? The president integrated the University of Arkansas over Orville Faubus's objections. I would expect that a president would have the authority to deploy military to keep the peace over insurrectionists and to make sure that the peaceful transition of power happens. But again, we only know that if we know our history, to point to specific examples where this has happened. And frankly, I mean, the president's duty is to ensure domestic tranquility. And part of that is making sure black folks have the right to traverse along the same federal lands and university campuses and capitals that everybody else does.
Perfect. We're going to open it up for a couple of questions, a few questions from the audience. The mic is right here, so feel free to go to the mic if you have any questions.
So, hello once again. My name is Morgan Willis. I am a senior mathematics education major, secondary education minor from Macon, Georgia. And growing up, like, two topics I was told to stay away from were religion and politics. So this has led me to be indirectly vocal when it comes to politics. And last year I had the opportunity to serve as a nonpartisan election monitor in Georgia, and in DC I was the election registration clerk. And with those volunteer opportunities, I witnessed that not a lot of black people are voting, and it's upsetting me because it's like, what can I do now to not only just work indirectly but be more vocal? And you mentioned how you wasn't really big in politics, so I wonder what motivated you and what made you want to maintain that commitment to become not only just a person within the community but a vocal leader to help change the community.
I had actually worked in kind of politics from the ages of 14 to 21. Mm-hmm. I worked on people's campaigns throughout New York and lower New York State. Around 21, 22, I became disappointed because I saw some of the people who I'd worked hard on their campaigns become indicted and go to jail, mm-hmm. right? And someone told me, well, there's two things you have to do in elected office. You know, you have to meet the needs of the people who elected you and what you promised them, and the second responsibility that you have is to get reelected. And sometimes I saw people very passionate about the first when they started, but then more focused on the second when they went forward. And of course, being young and thinking that everything in government was very easy and not fully understanding the game, you know, pure at heart, I became very frustrated and I walked away. And I also felt that people didn't want to hear our voices. I came to Howard as a poli-sci major, and I left as a social worker. And I felt that I was able to really impact community and the social and emotional needs and a lot of the everyday needs of our community in the area of social work. And so I'd always worked in HIV/AIDS and mental health and drug courts and homeless services, and I was the CEO for the YMCA. But I always served young people, and I always served seniors. You have first responders who are police and fire. I was a first responder to all of the social issues, usually way ahead of the curve on social issues than most people. And it was the young people in my community. They said, we are tired of the people who lack integrity. We are tired of people not following through on their promises and not explaining why. And we're tired of people feeling they weren't accountable. And so my campaign, I was recruited by people 30 and under. And my campaign was powered by, for the most part, people 25 to 35. And I felt like I had a responsibility. They said, you're the mother of Mount Vernon, your mom, and we believe that you hear us. And so that's what made me run, that and prayer, right? Because I'm a minister also, and I'm not gonna do anything that's outside of what I feel in my spirit. And so that's what pushed me into something that I really did not wanna go into. And so I'm the first re-elected mayor in my community in 20 years. I'm the first woman mayor in my community. And I still have very much the support of the young people and have utilized them versus used them, because there's a difference between utilizing and using people. I utilize people's strengths, talents, and frustrations to help empower them and empower our community, not their brilliance just to keep me in office. And so that's why I ran, and that's why I ran again, because it was really the young people in the community, and I wanted to make sure that they had not only choice, but they have voice. And I've been able to get them to now start running, and so our city council president is the youngest city council president now in the history of the community, as well as we see young people who are running for the school board. And while I don't have term limits, I've told my community I only want to do 2, because I don't want to set up a career in the mayor's office. I want to train those who replace me. I want to have a sense of urgency about what I need to do, and I need them to have a sense of urgency about stepping up to lead as well.
Thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Robinson. I'm a graduating senior criminology major, Afro-American Studies and Spanish dual minor from Atlanta, Georgia by way of Columbus, Ohio. I'm also an Alma Future Leaders alum and the co-leader of the Bison Votes Matter chapter of When We All Vote. So my question centers around, I guess, the protection of rights as well as ensuring that the people's choice actually is what we see come to fruition. So Vice President Harris always talks about how she loves Venn diagrams, right? And how the Venn diagram of the states attacking voting rights, attacking a woman's right to choose, and attacking LGBT rights is basically a circle, right? And we saw, you all mentioned January 6th. If those 2 Senate employees hadn't had the presence of mind to grab the box that had the Electoral College votes in it, we could have been in a constitutional crisis, because there's no procedure for what to do if those votes are destroyed or lost. So I guess my first question is, how do you feel about the system of the Electoral College? Should it be reformed? Should it be abolished in order to make sure that the will of the people is actually represented? Because there never would have been a Trump presidency if it weren't for the Electoral College. He lost the popular vote. So
the last several Republican elected presidents have all lost the popular vote. I think it's important that we acknowledge that. Right? Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. Al Gore won the popular vote. And, only one of the last 23 years of Republican presidential victories have won the popular vote. That was George Bush in 2004. So I think it's beyond that. And let's be clear about this. I'm not an expert on the Electoral College, but there is a whole lot of scholarship and research, and that has been boiled down and made plain, that shows that the Electoral College should probably be abandoned and reimagined. There are substantial arguments against it being jettisoned in favor of the popular vote, right? Because then you tend to, there are arguments that Earl, Arkansas's votes would count even less because candidates could simply defer towards places like Mount Vernon and more densely populated urban areas. But to be clear, here's what we do know. The Electoral College is a vestige of slave owners put in place to emphasize the votes of white slave landholding people, men, right? And so in the wake of an alternative, which I don't think that we have collectively come up with, I don't think that we move to action immediately. However, given how it started, I do think that the Electoral College has very, very, very little intellectual weight to stand on. And I think that we should probably begin talking about what are the viable methods to move towards as we move away from the Electoral College. However, the larger point here is that every single institution which undergirds the way government procedure works, and that procedure ultimately dictates policy outcomes, should be challenged, because none of it, not a single thing, was built for equitable participation. At the founding of this country, nobody on this stage and nobody in this room could participate, could fully participate. And that counts for the Electoral College and everything else in terms of all of the rules that we live under.
Ditto.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Talia Elliott. I'm a freshman political science major, Spanish minor from Rockville, Maryland. And my question was about how we, those of us who live in northern states, like I'm in DC now and I'm from Maryland, our voting rights aren't really being attacked. How would we be able to like engage in helping communities down south where obviously there are Republican leaders who are trying to actively suppress the black votes?
So I'm in New York,
Mm-hmm.
and our voting rights are being attacked.
Really?
And they're being attacked in Maryland, yes. And that was one of the things is I think my first 2 years as mayor, it was COVID, right? But so we were always on Zoom calls, and I would listen to the mayors in the South talk about all of the changes that were coming. And they were blatant changes, and they were subtle changes. And the elected officials looked at some of the subtler changes in the North, and gerrymandering. In New York, we did lose a congressional seat. And so Mondaire Jones, who is a good friend of mine, ends up, having to give up his seat, and he did not get reelected. He tried to run in the city and didn't get reelected. And we're trying to get that back in New York, trying to get his seat back that was won by a Republican. And that's the one thing that we cannot be rocked to sleep in the North. Above the Mason-Dixon line, I think that we are very comfortable feeling as if voter suppression doesn't happen. But a lot of what we see on television and that we hear is also voter suppression. Gerrymandering and voter ID laws and, all of the different things that the states have put out since 2000 are not the only types of voter suppression. Just the negative disinformation and misinformation eventually wears on your soul and your mind. And so in northern states, we're seeing lower and lower voter turnouts, period. And so lower voter turnouts is a form of voter suppression, because mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, people even in the North are exhausted. They're exhausted about government. They're exhausted because they don't feel that it's delivering. And trust me, people who are controlling those news stations know exactly what they're doing. They're constantly talking about one of the things we talked about with our black mayors all across the country. Violent crimes and homicides are down in most of your large urban black cities led by black mayors, but the reporting of it is up 400 times. And so you would not know that homicide rates and violent crimes have gone down in your larger black cities or in cities where you have black mayors, because the media is constantly reporting about it. And so it's that type of thing that does cause that disenchantment, even if it doesn't cause voter disenfranchisement, it causes disenchantment and causes people to stay home. And so we have to be careful about the redrawing of lines. We have to be careful about the fact that the North definitely lost seats because we did not come out for the census. And all of those things are still connected, but we still have to definitely go down south and help those who are below the Mason-Dixon line with their voter laws, and continue to support their candidacy, to support the education efforts, and to support policy changes and policy reversals that have been put in place and legislation that has been put in place. We are really one country at the end of the day, and we can't look at northern states and southern states. We move back and forth. We're very porous in many ways, and we are one people, and we're impacted wherever we live when you have the wrong people in government.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think, and I'll just really quickly, the mayor is exactly right in that there is broad disinformation campaigns, and we can never really fully measure the psychological impact that actually has on voter participation, which fundamentally amounts to it being suppression. I would suggest that up north, in northern states, if you are not expanding ballot box access, then it is contracting because suppression efforts are constantly rising. So if the ballot box access effort is not expanding and rising along with to match the suppression efforts, then we lose, right? Because suppression efforts are rising and they will eventually overtake even in the north. And so if your legislature and a lot, Massachusetts, New York, these folks can get locked into this notion that we are the good northern liberals, right? And we are doing things right. But if you are not expanding ballot box access, right, then your universe of voters is necessarily contracting, particularly as corporate media tells people that their vote matters less and less and less. So there's a broad universe of things that all of us can be doing, particularly in the North, to expand ballot box access. And what can you be doing to help in the South? I mean, we got to use the internet for something other than TikTok and Facebook and social media, right? You can help any campaign in the country and frankly in the world from the comfort of your laptop. And so what are we doing to make calls on the digitized systems? What are we doing to encourage registration, to donate, to marshal resources for campaigns, particularly in universities where we know that historical and intentional voter suppression exists?
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hi, how are y'all doing today?
Good,
my name is Robert Kelly, but I go by Khalil. I'm a sophomore honors finance major, legal communications minor from Long Island, New York, and I am a 2022-2023 Future Leaders alum. And I was also recently elected to be a senator here at Howard University School of Business. And my question is, I've noticed that one of our biggest problems in government is like our philosophy of governing, and this a personal leadership philosophy of mine is that it's more important to be a microphone and an amp for a group of people than it is to be a voice and a sounding board. So my question is, in creating policy that secures a group of people's like seat at the table and promotes education around voting rights and et cetera, how do we make sure that we're actually educated to be able to participate in those discussions, so expanding the conversation like a little bit broader than voting rights, but actually making sure that people understand how government works, understands how the difference between local and federal government and how that's structured, to make sure that they can come to the table with informed decisions and informed opinions.
I think we really have to push for civics to go back into schools. As a mayor, I think one of my biggest frustrations is that people do not understand government at all. They think that I can make decisions about the school district or that the school superintendent can dictate certain things in the city. They don't understand the difference between the legislative and the executive branch of local, county, state, or federal government. So we have to bring civics education back into the schools, but if that doesn't happen, you have to bring it back into your community. And so through our youth bureau, we're doing that with our young people and our young leaders and our young scholars. I have town halls, but I have really twice a month I have conversations, what I call community conversations. And I bring every single one of my commissioners out, and that's like over 50 top leaders within the city, out so that they can answer questions. We don't preach to the people. We're not telling them who we are and what we do. We said this is for conversation, complaints, and solutions. We want to hear your complaints. We want to find solutions. We want to have that conversation right here. And so we're bringing government to them. Until we help people to really understand that they have a voice, it's going to be very hard to engage them and help them understand how government works. We cannot sit there and talk to people in acronyms all day long, because that's what people do when they want to disenfranchise people, is they talk to them in political jargon and in acronyms, which really disenfranchises them. So there has to be a place where you could break it down, have the conversation, and help people really, really walk through it. I looked at my aunt's, she died, she was 96, and I looked in her yearbook the other day, and it had an Our Town Club. And that Our Town Club really had young people who came in and took on different positions in City Hall and met with the mayor and the city council. And so that is something in my community I'm looking to bring back, because there really is a fundamental lack of understanding as to local government. So trust me, federal government becomes very, very confusing for people. And if we make people feel dumb because they don't understand it, then they will not come back to have the conversation. So we almost have to make it universally accessible, that information, so that people will step in and become more informed. And once they become more informed and enlightened, then we can help them become more engaged, more enlightened, and more empowered to participate locally and on a larger scale. We have to find ways to help give people voice.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Willie White III, and I'm a sophomore political science major, sociology minor from Blacksburg, Georgia. So this is a question for either of you, but I know you specifically were talking about like election procedures earlier that would make voting more accessible for people. So being a political science major, one of the main, or that's some of the main things that we've been talking about, like the electoral process and making it more accessible for people to get access to voting. So I was kind of wondering what your opinions are on ranked choice voting and how effective those are in with the electoral process.
A lot of cities have gone to ranked choice voting, and I think it's I don't have an opinion on whether or not it's the way that American elections should be conducted writ large forever, but I'm for innovation in the electoral process. So I'm for new ideas that reimagine how we select leaders as long as it remains an equitable process. Do you all know what ranked choice voting is? Okay. So ranked choice voting means that, you know, particularly in relatively close elections, we can reach a candidate that represents a more consensus, right? That represents a consensus that people are happy with, if it's not the person that would be, you know, number one in a necessarily a one-on-one conventional way. I am for giving communities the opportunity to learn about ranked choice voting and decide whether it's something they want to implement. I have seen in my hometown, St. Louis, and a few other major cities around the country, that's akin to the jungle primary in California, I've seen that it can be a relatively effective way, and that ultimately people feel a lot more represented, because if your second or even third choice gets in there, perhaps that's a better situation than, you know, winner take all. But I think that ultimately I'm encouraged by ranked choice discussions, because I think that electoral processes should not be held sacrosanct in terms of we shouldn't be able to challenge them, and we shouldn't be able to talk about whether or not there's a better idea or a better way to go about choosing our leaders. Because when you're choosing your leaders, you're ultimately choosing the policies that you want to govern this town. And so when you think about things like the Electoral College, that should be reimagined. And part of that, it shouldn't stop at the Electoral College. There's an election every month in this country, somewhere, right? And those are the issues that govern the everyday issues that are people's families and people's kitchen tables and things like that. And so I'm for ranked choice discussions just because I'm for discussions about how to innovate in the electoral process, because the entire world around us is innovating, and there's no reason that electoral and franchise-based discussions should not be thinking about and consistently challenging ourselves to think about what is the best procedure to get the policy outcomes we're looking for.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. As CEO of the African American Mayors Association, I want to first thank Murphy Jones, who is Vice President of Howard University Government Association, and Mayor Jalen Smith, who is the mayor of Earle, Arkansas, and also the youngest Black mayor in the entire U.S., for their first panel. And for those of you who don't know, Jalen didn't even tell his parents he was running for office. He just went and put his name on the ballot. And for our second panel, Mayor Sean Patterson Howard from the great city of Mount Vernon, New York, and President of the African American Mayors Association, and my friend, my boy, Don Calloway, who is an MSNBC contributor and former state representative in the state of Missouri. And so just to have a little conversation, we actually have a reception across the lobby in the other room. So I had never met a college student that wasn't hungry. So go in there, eat up all the food, feel free, drink up all the lemonade or whatever we ordered. And thank you most graciously for what our partners, when we all vote, and Howard University for hosting us today. Thank you.